The fight for religious freedom. The Vice President addresses a Catholic crowd in Florida. Lauren Ashburn travels to Ave Maria University to talk to Mike Pence. Capitol Hill debate. Lawmakers discuss President Donald Trump's policy of people who identify as transgender and their ability to serve in the military. Chile abuse crisis. An appeals court sides with 3 victims of the country's most notorious predator priest. And top military award. President Trump presents the Medal of Honor to the family of a fallen hero. On EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, March 28, 2019. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you for joining us for News from a Catholic Perspective. I'm Wyatt Goolsby. Tonight, Vice President Mike Pence renews the Trump administration's commitment to religious freedom. Our Lauren Ashburn traveled with the Vice President to Ave Maria University for a one-on-one conversation.
The Vice President arrived this morning in sunny Florida at Ave Maria University and toured the Mother Teresa Museum housed here. He spoke to students, teachers, about the importance of religious freedom.
Vice President Mike Pence coming to Ave Maria University.
The men and women of Ave Maria University have stood without apology for the sanctity of human life.
To rousing applause, the Vice President spoke for 45 minutes to students and professors of this Catholic university. He talked about the importance of religious liberty here and across the world.
Our founders knew that this precious liberty was not granted by government and could not be granted by government. They knew, as we know today, that we are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights.
The biggest applause?
Here at home, President Trump signed a law making it possible for all 50 states to defund Planned Parenthood.
He called out Democrats for failing Obamacare and socialized medicine.
The truth is, leading members of the Democratic Party across this country are embracing a radical agenda of abortion on demand.
And said the Republican Party is going to be the party of health care for all Americans.
Which is why we created a religious and moral exemption to the federal rule so that all Americans can live out their faith freely in the healthcare system of this country.
He said he's been mocked for his religious beliefs and urged everyone to follow the words of Mother Teresa.
She said, at the end of life, we will not be judged by how many diplomas we've received, how much money we've made, or how many great things we have done. We will be judged by, I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was naked and you clothed me. I was homeless and you took me in.
After the speech, he toured the campus and the museum, where he spoke with me exclusively.
Mr. Vice President, thank you for joining us.
You bet, Lauren. Good to see you.
You just gave a speech about religious freedom, health care, a variety of topics important to the administration. Yet freedom of religion is very important to you. The last time we talked, your wife was under attack for going to teach art at a Christian school. How else has this affected your life?
Well, it hasn't affected our life much at all. As I said to you before, we're used to criticism. But to be able to stand here at Ave Maria University, to be able to see all these bright, shining young faces, I just wanted them to know that while it's become fashionable in recent days for media elites and Hollywood liberals to be critical of people with religious faith, that we stand with them, and that the American people stand in solidarity for the freedom of religious expression of every American. And we cherish Christian education. This is a remarkable university to think of this place in just 10 short years and the impact that they're having, not just in laying a foundation of education for these children, but Lauren, to learn of how these young people are serving in their community, literally serving around the world. It's been truly inspiring to be here.
And not just in America are you fighting for religious freedom. You mentioned recently that Secretary Mike Pompeo said, and he and Ambassador Brownback have continued to call out China as the worst violators of human rights in the world. It's cracking down on ethnic minorities, Catholics, the Uyghur Muslims. And I'm wondering, will we see conditions on human indignities included in trade talks?
Well, let me just say that it is it's with a heavy heart that we reflect that more than 80% of the world's population live in societies where there is religious repression or restriction on religious liberty. And the United States and this administration have stood strong, whether it be in this hemisphere, in Nicaragua, where we've literally seen gangs attack Catholic churches and Catholic priests, whether we see the brutality of ISIS that our armed forces and our allies have recently taken back every inch of territory the ISIS caliphate had once controlled, or whether it's in the world's most populous nation of China. The United States will always call out nations around the world to recognize and to respect the religious beliefs of their citizens. And with regard to China, we're engaged in discussions about resetting our trading relationship. Not just the imbalance, Lauren, but our negotiations are focused on structural issues like the theft of intellectual property, of forced technology transfers, all the things that have impacted our trading relationship and created such an imbalance for American workers and American businesses. We're hopeful that those discussions will go forward and be productive with China. They're going on literally as we speak. But rest assured, as our relationship with China continues to change and to grow, we're going to speak out and we're going to stand up for the rights of religious minorities in China and everywhere around the world.
You spoke about abortion in your speech today. On Tuesday, Secretary Mike Pompeo announced the expansion of the Mexico City policy, and yesterday he was on Capitol Hill talking about that expansion when Representative Lois Frankel, a Democrat from right here in Florida, called the Trump administration abortion obsessed. What's your response to that?
This is an administration that's deeply committed to the sanctity of human life and to upholding those policies in not only our domestic policies, but also in foreign policy and in foreign aid. And what the Secretary of State announced this week at the President's direction was that the Mexico City policy, which prevents any taxpayer dollars from going to organizations that promote abortion around the world, we're now making sure that organizations can't transfer those dollars to organizations that utilize abortion as a means of birth control. This is keeping faith with a policy that Ronald Reagan established, and I couldn't be more proud to serve alongside the most pro-life president in American history, whether it be reinstituting the Mexico City policy in the early days of this administration, whether it be standing for conscience protections of institutions like Ave Maria University. This administration, President Donald Trump and I, will always stand for life.
The Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act would outlaw and penalize infanticide. We have seen in New York, you can now have an abortion there right up until the moment of birth. Pro-lifers are so disheartened by this. States are pushing back, but what is the administration going to do to counter those kind of state laws?
Well, first, let me just say that the fact that you see states like Virginia and New York taking up legislation that allows for late-term abortion, when you see the governor of Virginia actually support infanticide, and then to see Democrats in the Senate vote against a bill that protects children that are born alive, it just suggests to you, I think, the desperation of the left in this country. The truth is, and I saw it in the faces of these children at this school today, more and more Americans are embracing the sanctity of life. Life is winning in America, and particularly among younger Americans who are recognizing the sanctity of life. And with President Trump's appointment of strict constructionists to our federal courts at every level, We sense that the left is now reaching. They're bringing that abortion on demand agenda to the state levels, and they're really revealing that they're the party of abortion on demand and even the party of infanticide. And our party under President Trump will always stand for the sanctity of life, and will stand with the unborn.
Under the Affordable Care Act, abortion was made a lot more readily available to people. Now, President Trump says the GOP is going to be the party of health care. So, are there elements of the Affordable Care Act that you would preserve, like pre-existing conditions or health coverage of adult children?
Lauren, there are elements of Obamacare, like protecting pre-existing condition, allowing adult children to remain on their parents' health insurance, that the Republicans have long supported and the President and I strongly support. But look, Obamacare has failed. We all remember the broken promises of Obamacare. If you like your doctor, you can keep it. If you like your insurance, you can keep it. They said that health insurance premiums would go down. They've actually gone up dramatically, more than 100% in some places around the country. What President Trump announced this week is that we are going to be the party of health care. While the Democrats have made it clear where they're headed, it's even more government takeover of health care. Their Medicare for All proposal is nothing short of socialized medicine, single-payer health care that would take the most precious decisions in our lives and the lives of our families and put them in the hands of bureaucrats with scarce federal resources. President Trump and I believe that the time has come for us to reject socialized medicine, reject their government takeover of health care. And we're working with members of Congress as we speak to lay out a plan for health care reform that's built on the doctor-patient relationship, that's built on the principles of freedom that have already created the greatest health care system the world has ever known.
When will we see the plan?
Working on it as we speak with members of Congress. Even this week we've begun discussions, and I know those are underway in the House and in the Senate. But look, the American people have a choice to make in this coming election. Our administration has already supported reforms like association health plans that have created more health insurance choices for Americans and for small businesses. Democrats want Medicare for all. They want government-run health care along the socialist model of Canada and other European countries. We're going to be presenting to the American people in the course of this election a health care plan that's built on freedom, that'll lower the cost of health insurance without growing the size of government.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vice President, for joining us at the Mother Teresa Museum here. I know you quote her often. Thank you.
I do. Such an inspiration, and it's great to see you here, Lauren.
Our thanks to Lauren Ashburn for that interview. Multiple sources have independently reported to our partners at the Catholic News Agency that Pope Francis is expected to appoint a new Archbishop of Washington soon. CNA reports Archbishop Wilton Gregory of Atlanta has been asked to lead the archdiocese. He would replace Cardinal Donald Worrell, whose resignation was accepted in October. Worrell has served as administrator since then. A formal announcement could come as early as next week. For more on the story, including the background on Worrell and on Gregory, visit CatholicNewsAgency.com. And coming up, Education Secretary Betsy DeVos is grilled in Congress over her proposed budget. Stay with us. Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Goolsby in for Lauren Ashburn. The House of Representatives condemns President Donald Trump's order limiting transgender troops serving in the military. It's a symbolic vote that doesn't change policy, but it does send a message. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi tells us about the fiery debate. Jason?
Wyatt, former President Barack Obama allowed people identifying as transgender to serve openly. President Trump changed that. People who've already transitioned cannot enlist. Troops already serving must do so according to their biological sex. There is an exemption for people who began gender transition under Obama's 2016 rules. Today, the House fights over who can fight.
All House Democrats
it reflects bigotry.
Say they're against the president's limits on transgender troops.
5 chiefs of staff for the military branches have testified that they're aware of exactly 0 instances of a transgender service member negatively impacting discipline or morale.
But Republican Vicky Hartzler defends the president's policy.
The individual readiness of those undergoing treatment for gender dysphoria will be impacted. It takes over 260 days just to recover from the surgery.
The Pentagon says since 2016, more than 1,500 service members were diagnosed with gender dysphoria, discomfort with their biological sex.
The Department of Defense announced already that they have spent $8 million on those individuals who have identified as transgender last year, and that money has been spent on psychotherapy, on sex change operations, and that's money that could have been spent on bullets.
Still, every Democrat and 5 Republicans voted against the president's policy.
On this vote, the yeas are 238, the nays are 185.
Catholic theologian Chad Pecknold questions the vote.
I think the Pentagon has a right to be very interested in the realities, both the psychological and the biological realities behind gender dysphoria. These are psychological discomforts for people that we have to treat sensitively, treat them as images of their creator, but we don't do them any favors by coddling fantasy.
Troops at the center of this debate are fighting President Trump's policy in court. Right now, it will go into effect April 12th. Archbishop Timothy Broglio of the Archdiocese of Military Services says the church clearly teaches that gender is given at birth. It cannot be changed. He adds people in the armed services must be ready for combat. Wyatt?
Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi reporting. Thanks, Jason. Department of Education Secretary Betsy DeVos faced questions today on Capitol Hill over a proposal to eliminate government funding from the Special Olympics, including a sparring match with Senator Dick Durbin of Illinois.
Did you personally approve this? I think a yes or no will do. The $18 million cut of the funding for Special Olympics?
No, I didn't personally get involved in that.
Well, I want to tell you, whoever came up with that idea at OMB gets a Special Olympic gold medal for insensitivity.
DeVos later fired back at Durbin, saying, quote, "Let's not use disabled children in a twisted way for your political narrative." The 2020 budget calls for eliminating $17.6 million from Special Olympics funding. Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi honors the NASA female mathematicians who inspired the film Hidden Figures. The 3 African-American women worked for the United States in the space race in the 1960s against the Soviet Union. One of them, Katherine Johnson, crunched numbers on a calculator at her desk to help astronaut John Glenn land safely. President Trump honors the late Army Staff Sergeant Travis Atkins, who died in Iraq with the Medal of Honor.
In his final moments on earth, Travis did not run. He didn't know what it was to run. He did not hesitate. He rose to the highest calling. He laid down his life to save the lives of his fellow warriors.
During the ceremony yesterday, President Trump recognized Atkins as a fallen hero who made the, quote, supreme sacrifice for our nation. The Medal of Honor is the nation's highest military award for bravery against an enemy. Lawmakers in New Jersey pass a bill to legalize assisted suicide. The state's Democratic governor says he will sign it into law. Catholic leaders are against the proposal. The Archdiocese of Newark says assisted suicide promotes neither free choice nor compassion. A federal judge extends a temporary order preventing 2 pro-life laws in Kentucky from taking effect. It will last until the court determines whether the measures are constitutional. One is the heartbeat bill, which would ban abortion once a baby's heartbeat is detected. The other prevents an abortion based on gender or if the baby is disabled. And in Tennessee, lawmakers block a measure that would have outlawed abortion if Roe v. Wade is overturned. It's known as the Trigger Law and has already passed in Louisiana, Mississippi, North Dakota, and South Dakota. Tennessee's Republican-led General Assembly is considering whether to advance a heartbeat bill. And tonight on EWTN Pro-Life Weekly, Catherine Hadro talks to Abby Johnson. She's the former clinic director of America's largest abortion provider, Planned Parenthood.
I'm looking around and I'm looking at all these people here and I'm just like, look at what God is doing. Look at what he's doing in our culture. Look what he's doing here tonight in Hollywood.
Unplanned, a film about Johnson's journey, will be in theaters tomorrow. You can see more of Catherine Hadro's interview tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern, right here on EWTN. Up next, the latest on the clergy abuse crisis in Chile. And the Vatican responds after a video of the Pope pulling his hand away from pilgrims goes viral. Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Goolsby in for Lauren Ashburn. A court in Chile says the Catholic Church must compensate 3 victims of the country's most notorious pedophile priest.
El objetivo fundamental es haber dejado la herencia de este surco en la legislación chilena.
One of the victims says they achieved their objective was to show there was a cover-up. Each of the 3 will receive roughly $150,000. They're survivors of abuse from Father Fernando Caradima. The ruling could prompt hundreds of others to demand compensation. Next week, the Vatican will release a document dedicated to today's youth. Earlier this week, Pope Francis signed the text called Christ Lives in Loreto, Italy. He gives his take on the October 2018 meeting of the world's bishops and ways to better minister to today's young people. Ben Martin is vice president for the new evangelization of Caritas and Veritate, a federation of Catholic groups that engage and mobilize the next generation. Ben, your group is following up on the Synod on Youth and the Holy Father's emphasis on charity. There's a forum taking place in Rome right now, and you're focused on how to pass on the faith. What are your hopes? What do you want to hear from Pope Francis' document, which comes out next week?
I'm hoping to see Pope Francis take the results of the Synod and the final document produced by the bishops and develop that further, just to give a clear and sharp articulation of his own thought, what he thinks came out of the Synod and where he thinks the Church is going next.
Well, as you know, there are so many challenges to the new evangelization. According to the Pew Research Center, young adults are more likely to be religiously unaffiliated. This is especially true in the U.S. and Canada, where younger people are way less likely to claim a religion. In your experience, how can the Catholic Church engage them?
I think that Catholic Church can reach out to people of my generation by really proclaiming the same message that the Church has always proclaimed, but doing so as sharply and as clearly as possible. And I don't mean to say clearly in any ideological sense. I think the Church can be both creative and sharp in explaining its teachings to youth today.
What are you hearing from young people who are taking part in your conference, and what's your group's goal when it comes to engaging young people and thinking about what their concerns are?
I think the young people participating in the conference are excited that we're taking up this task. The goal of the forum itself is to produce a document that would supplement the final document of the Synod with greater emphasis on evangelization and specifically on concrete strategies for reaching out to people in my generation.
When it comes to the new evangelization, we're all called to evangelize. Do you have any advice for all of us Catholics out here who are living in the world who want to spread the message of Christ?
I think probably the best advice would be you stick to clear and a simple presentation of the gospel, and we also present it with humility and openness to discover new articulations that we work out with the people that we know and love.
Such an important message, important conference that's going on right now. Ben Martin, Vice President for the new evangelization of Caritas and Veritate Global, thanks so much for speaking with us today.
Thank you, Wyatt.
Finally tonight, the Vatican is setting the record straight amid criticisms over a viral video showing Pope Francis pulling his hand away as people tried to kiss his ring. Vatican spokesman Alessandro Gisotti says the Holy Father was concerned about hygiene after greeting many well-wishers in Loreto. Critics have blasted Pope Francis for disrespecting tradition. Gisotti denied the accusations. The Vatican also says before that video was taken, the Pope allowed visitors one by one to kiss his ring for 10 minutes. And with that, we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Wyatt Goolsby. We're back tomorrow with more news from a Catholic perspective. Good night, and God bless.